Our marriage counselor, Dr. Brennan, told my parents to date other people and spent sessions talking about her own divorce until I started secretly leaving psychology, books around the house, and writing anonymous relationship advice letters. But when my parents told her what I'd done, she filed false reports with my school, saying I had concerning behavioral patterns and tried to have me removed from my home until I documented everything and discovered she'd been destroying families for years while billing insurance for fake sessions. Dr. Brennan showed up to our first family session wearing wrinkled clothes and reeking of cigarettes. She spent half the appointment scrolling through her phone while my parents poured their hearts out. Her first piece of advice was that mom and dad should take a break from each other to find themselves. Even at 13, I recognized this as terrible guidance for a couple trying to save their marriage. Things deteriorated rapidly from there. In the second session, she suggested my parents should start dating other people to appreciate what they had. Are you serious? My dad looked ready to walk out, and mom started crying. Dr. Brennan just shrugged and said, sometimes jealousy reignites passion. After we left, I heard dad tell mom he wanted to stop going, but she insisted they needed professional help. I went to the library that same afternoon and checked out every relationship psychology book I could carry. The following appointment reached new levels of incompetence. Dr. Brennan spent 20 minutes talking about her own messy divorce instead of focusing on my parents. She actually said, marriage is outdated anyway. Most couples are happier apart. Mom and dad sat there looking defeated. She went on to describe her ex-husband's flaws in excruciating detail, then asked my mother, don't you just hate how men leave their socks everywhere? When dad pointed out this seemed unprofessional, she accused him of being defensive. That evening, I found them arguing in the kitchen about whether therapy was making things worse. I knew someone had to intervene. I began leaving strategic books around the house. The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work on Dad's nightstand. Hold Me Tight on Mom's desk. Crucial Conversations in the bathroom. I'd highlight relevant passages with sticky notes. Neither of them knew it was me. They thought the other person was making an effort, which actually helped. Mom would mention something from Dad's book at dinner, and he'd smile, thinking she noticed his supposed effort at self-improvement. At dinner, I'd casually bring up concepts I'd learned. Hey, did you guys know that couples who express gratitude daily are 50% more likely to stay together? I'd pretend I heard it at school. My parents would exchange glances, and sometimes one would thank the other for cooking or picking up groceries. Once I mentioned that my health teacher said couples who laugh together have stronger bonds. Dad immediately told a corny joke, and Mom actually giggled. Dr. Brennan's advice grew increasingly destructive. She told Mom that Dad's long work hours meant he didn't care about the family. She told Dad that Mom's emotional needs were excessive. She introduced bizarre exercises like screaming into pillows to release marital rage and suggested they sleep in separate rooms permanently. After one particularly awful session where she had them list each other's worst qualities for 40 minutes straight, my parents came home and had their biggest fight yet. I heard doors slamming and Mom crying in the bathroom. That's when I got bold. I wrote them an anonymous letter, supposedly from a concerned friend, suggesting they try daily check-ins where each person shared one appreciation and one concern without judgment. I slipped it under their door after researching conflict resolution techniques from the Gottman Institute. The letter included specific instructions: speak for no more than 2 minutes each, no interrupting, and always end with a hug. Miraculously, they started doing it. I watched them transform slowly. Instead of Dad coming home and immediately turning on the TV, he'd find Mom and do their check-in. Instead of Mom bottling up frustrations until they exploded, she'd calmly share them during their evening ritual. My little brother asked why they were being so weird, but I just smiled. Meanwhile, Dr. Brennan's sessions became increasingly unhinged. She started each appointment by complaining about her own life, charged them for her full hour despite showing up 20 minutes late, and once answered a personal call during their session about her own custody battle. She recommended books like Women Who Love Too Much and The Myth of Monogamy, completely inappropriate for a couple trying to reconcile. The tipping point arrived when Dr. Brennan suggested separation during the holidays to gain perspective. She said spending Christmas apart would help them evaluate their priorities. My parents looked broken. She handed them business cards for divorce lawyers, saying it was just in case. On the drive home, Mom said maybe they should consider it. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. From the back seat, I said, Dr. Brennan's advice goes against everything reputable therapists recommend. I've been reading about it. My parents were stunned. I confessed everything: the books, the notes, the letter. I pulled out my notebook where I'd been documenting her terrible advice versus evidence-based approaches. I showed them printouts from the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy about what constitutes malpractice. Dad actually pulled over to look at my notes. Mom was speechless. I thought I had done good, but it turns out I hadn't, because they called Dr. Brennan immediately to let her know what I had done, and that put her career in jeopardy, something she wasn't willing to let go. The next morning started differently. Mom and Dad weren't speaking at breakfast. They moved around each other in the kitchen like strangers, avoiding eye contact. My little brother kept looking between them, confused. I pushed my cereal around, watching them perform this awkward dance of avoidance. Then the phone rang. Mom answered, and her face went pale. She handed it to Dad without a word. His expression darkened as he listened. After hanging up, they both turned to look at me. Dr. Brennan had filed a formal complaint with the school district. She claimed I was exhibiting concerning behavioral patterns and manipulative tendencies that required immediate psychological evaluation. The principal wanted to meet with all of us that afternoon. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about therapy anymore. At school, I couldn't concentrate. During lunch, the guidance counselor pulled me aside. Mrs. Chen had always been kind, but today she looked worried. She asked strange questions about my home life, my relationship with my parents, whether I felt safe. I realized Dr. Brennan had been calling people, planting seeds of doubt. The principal's office felt smaller than usual that afternoon. My parents sat stiffly in their chairs while Principal Morrison reviewed a thick folder. Dr. Brennan had submitted a detailed report suggesting I showed signs of parentification and pathological need for control. She recommended intensive therapy, possibly even temporary removal from the home for evaluation. My hands shook as I listened. This woman was trying to tear our family apart because I'd exposed her incompetence. Dad's jaw clenched. Mom gripped her purse so tightly her knuckles went white, but they didn't defend me. me. They just sat there, silent, while the principal discussed options. On the drive home, the silence was suffocating. Finally, Mom spoke. She wondered aloud if maybe Dr. Brennan had a point. Maybe I was too involved in their marriage. Maybe I did have control issues. Dad agreed. They started listing times I'd overstepped, seeing patterns where none existed. Dr. Brennan had gotten into their heads, twisted their perspective. By the time we pulled into the driveway, they'd decided I needed therapy. With a colleague, Dr. Brennan recommended. That night, I lay awake planning. If Dr. Brennan wanted to play dirty, I'd have to be smarter. I started documenting everything. Every interaction, every phone call I overheard, every change in my parents' behavior. I used my phone to record conversations when I could, keeping backup files on a flash drive I hid in my room. The next few days were torture. My parents watched me constantly, analyzing every word and action. They whispered when they thought I couldn't hear, debating whether my behavior was normal. Dr. Brennan had given them a checklist of warning signs that included things like excessive reading about adult topics and attempting to solve family problems independently. At school, rumors started spreading. Someone's mom worked at Dr. Brennan's office and had overheard things. Kids whispered that I was crazy or dangerous. My best friend Sarah stopped sitting with me at lunch. Even teachers looked at me differently. Dr. Brennan wasn't done. She called our house repeatedly, leaving voicemails about urgent concerns she needed to discuss with my parents. She sent emails with articles about teenage personality disorders, highlighting passages about manipulation and control. She even showed up at Dad's workplace, claiming she needed to warn him about my escalating behavior. My parents started fighting again, but now it was about me. Mom thought they should follow Dr. Brennan's recommendations immediately. Dad was hesitant but weakening. They scheduled an appointment with Dr. Brennan's colleague, Dr. Hoffman, for the following week. I knew I had to act fast. I spent hours at the library researching Dr. Brennan's background. I found her professional profiles, her education history, her previous employment. Then I discovered something interesting. She'd left her last practice suddenly, with no explanation. The practice's website had removed all mention of her. I dug deeper. Using techniques I'd learned from online journalism tutorials, I searched social media, professional forums, and review sites. Patterns emerged. Complaints about boundary violations, inappropriate self-disclosure, and unprofessional conduct. Nothing official, but enough to paint a picture. Meanwhile, Dr. Brennan escalated her campaign. She convinced the school counselor to require weekly check-ins with me. The way she weaponizes professional systems against a 13-year-old who simply documented her malpractice shows how dangerous unchecked authority can become. She had my teachers monitoring my behavior and reporting back. She even reached out to extended family, expressing concerns about our household dynamics. My aunt called Mom in tears, begging her to get me help. My grandmother sent a long letter about the importance of professional guidance. Dr. Brennan was systematically turning everyone against me, making me look like the problem while she played the concerned professional. The breaking point came when I overheard Mom on the phone with a residential treatment facility. They were discussing admission procedures for troubled teens. My own mother was considering sending me away based on the lies of a vindictive therapist. That night, I made a decision. If my parents wouldn't listen to me, maybe they'd listen to others who'd been in their position. I created an anonymous email account and reached out to every review site and forum where I'd seen complaints about Dr. Brennan. I asked if anyone would be willing to share their experiences. The responses trickled in slowly. A mother whose marriage ended after Dr. Brennan convinced her that her husband was narcissistic. A father who lost custody of his children after Dr. Brennan testified about his anger issues that she'd largely fabricated. A couple who'd spent thousands on therapy that only made their problems worse. But I needed more than stories. I needed proof of her current malpractice. I set up a meeting with Mrs. Chen during study hall. She seemed surprised when I walked into her office carrying a folder thick with printouts. I explained that I needed her help understanding something important. I showed her the anonymous testimonials I'd collected about Dr. Brennan, careful not to reveal how I'd obtained them. Mrs. Chen's expression shifted from skepticism to concern as she read through the accounts. She closed the folder and looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and made a call to someone she addressed as a colleague from her previous school. They spoke in hushed tones about professional ethics and mandatory reporting. When she hung up, she told me she needed to think about what I'd shown her. That afternoon, Dr. Hoffman's office smelled like vanilla candles and old books. My parents flanked me on a leather couch while he reviewed Dr. Brennan's referral notes. Unlike Dr. Brennan, he actually looked professional in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt. He asked me direct questions about my interests, my grades, my friendships. I answered honestly, watching him take careful notes. When he asked about the marriage books, I explained my research methodology. I showed him my bibliography, complete with page numbers and highlighted passages. His eyebrows rose slightly. He asked my parents to step out for a few minutes. Alone with him, I pulled out my documentation folder. I showed him the timeline of Dr. Brennan's sessions with my parents, her increasingly destructive advice, and the correlation with their worsening relationship. I presented it like a science fair project, complete with graphs showing the decline in my parents' communication after each session. Dr. Hoffman studied my materials carefully. He asked probing questions about my motivations, my feelings about my parents' marriage, and my understanding of appropriate boundaries. I answered everything truthfully. When my parents returned, he told them he'd need several more sessions before making any recommendations. On the drive home, my parents seemed confused. They'd expected Dr. Hoffman to confirm Dr. Brennan's diagnosis immediately. Instead, he'd seemed impressed by my organizational skills and suggested they focus on their own relationship rather than pathologizing my behavior. Dr. Brennan called that evening, demanding to know what had happened at the appointment. I could hear her shrill voice through Dad's phone from across the room. She insisted Dr. Hoffman was incompetent and recommended yet another colleague. Dad hung up on her mid-sentence. The next morning brought a new development. The school called to say Mrs. Chen had filed a report with the state licensing board about Dr. Brennan's conduct. Apparently, what I'd shown her, combined with her colleague's input, had triggered mandatory reporting requirements. The principal wanted to meet with us again to discuss the situation. This meeting felt different. Principal Morrison's demeanor had shifted from concerned to protective. He explained that the school had received multiple calls from Dr. Brennan that seemed increasingly erratic. He documented each one, noting reporting her emotional state and contradictory claims. He showed us transcripts where she'd first claimed I was dangerously manipulative, then called back hours later insisting I was being neglected. My parents exchanged worried glances. They were beginning to see the pattern I'd been trying to show them. The principal suggested we document any further contact from Dr. Brennan and consider filing a restraining order if her behavior escalated. That weekend, Dr. Brennan showed up at our house unannounced. I watched from my bedroom window as she pounded on the front door, demanding to speak with my parents about their negligent parenting. Dad stepped outside to talk with her while Mom called the police. By the time they arrived, Dr. Brennan had worked herself into a frenzy, accusing our entire family of conspiring against her. The officers took statements from everyone. They seemed particularly interested in Dr. Brennan's claim that we'd stolen confidential files from her office. When asked for evidence, she couldn't provide any. They suggested she leave the property and avoid further contact with our family. Monday brought another surprise. 3 of Dr. Brennan's current clients had contacted the licensing board after hearing about the investigation. They shared their own experiences of inappropriate behavior and boundary violations. One couple revealed that Dr. Brennan had tried to recruit the wife as a personal friend, even suggesting they go bar hopping together to find better men. I learned about this through Mrs. Chen, who'd become an unexpected ally. She couldn't share official details, but mentioned that the investigation was expanding. She also connected my parents with a legitimate family therapist who specialized in evidence-based approaches. Our first session with Dr. Martinez was revelatory. She actually listened to all 3 of us, validated our experiences, and helped my parents see how Dr. Brennan had manipulated them. She praised my research skills while also helping me understand appropriate boundaries. Most importantly, she gave my parents tools to strengthen their relationship without my intervention. Dr. Brennan's campaign against us intensified. She created fake social media accounts to spread rumors about our family. She contacted my teachers with concerns about my mental health. She even reached out to my friends' parents, warning them that I was a dangerous influence on their children. Each action backfired spectacularly. The fake accounts were easily traced back to her IP address. Teachers who'd known me for years dismissed her claims and reported her harassment to the administration. Parents who received her calls were disturbed by her unprofessional behavior, and several filed their own complaints. I continued documenting everything meticulously. Every email, every call, every incident went into my ever-growing file. Dr. Hoffman had praised this approach during our sessions, noting that my attention to detail and evidence-based thinking were actually signs of high intelligence, not pathology. My parents' relationship began improving under Dr. Martinez's guidance. They learned to communicate without my anonymous interventions. They started date nights again, and even laughed together at dinner. My little brother stopped asking why they were acting weird because they weren't anymore. They were just being normal, happy parents. Dr. Brennan's professional world crumbled around her. The licensing board investigation revealed a pattern of misconduct spanning years. Former clients came forward with stories of broken marriages, custody battles she'd influenced with biased testimony, and inappropriate personal relationships with vulnerable patients. One particularly damaging revelation came from her former practice. They'd asked her to leave after she'd been caught recording sessions without consent and sharing client details at social gatherings. She'd claimed the recordings were for training purposes, but investigation showed she'd been building files on prominent community members for potential blackmail. The investigation also uncovered financial irregularities. Dr. Brennan had been billing insurance for sessions that never occurred, padding invoices with fake diagnostic codes, and charging some clients for emergency consultations that were actually personal phone calls about her own problems. As her professional life imploded, Dr. Brennan's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started showing up at places she knew we'd be: the grocery store, the library, school events. She never approached directly, but would stare from across parking lots or lurk in nearby aisles. We documented each incident with photos and witness statements. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following month. Our lawyer, recommended by Dr. Martinez, assured us we had more than enough evidence. The stack of documentation I'd compiled would prove instrumental in showing a pattern of harassment and professional misconduct. Dr. Hoffman submitted a formal report stating that my behavior showed no signs of pathology. Instead, he commended my problem-solving abilities and suggested I might want to consider a career in psychology or law. He noted that my intervention in my parents' marriage, while unconventional, had likely saved their relationship from Dr. Brennan's destructive influence. My parents read his report with tears in their eyes. Dr. Brennan showing up at their house uninvited like some kind of therapy zombie is where things went from weird to, maybe we should check the locks twice. They apologized for doubting me, for considering sending me away, for letting Dr. Brennan manipulate them. I told them I understood. She was supposed to be the professional, the expert they could trust. Her betrayal of that trust had hurt all of us. The school lifted all monitoring requirements and removed any mention of Dr. Brennan's concerns from my records. Mrs. Chen became a regular check-in for me, not because I needed counseling, but because she was fascinated by my research methods and wanted to nurture my analytical skills. Friends who distanced themselves slowly returned. Sarah apologized for believing the rumors and asked to see my research files. She was amazed by the thoroughness of my documentation and suggested I start a blog about recognizing therapeutic malpractice. I declined. I'd had enough of Dr. Brennan to last a lifetime. My parents' sessions with Dr. Martinez continued to yield positive results. They learned to recognize the damage Dr. Brennan had inflicted and developed strategies to heal from it. They also established better boundaries with me, acknowledging my intelligence while ensuring I could still be a kid. The licensing board's investigation expanded to include Dr. Brennan's colleague network. Several therapists who'd been accepting her referrals came under scrutiny. It turned out she'd been part of an informal group that referred difficult clients to each other, often with inflated diagnoses that justified extended treatment. One evening, while researching college psychology programs at the library, I noticed Dr. Brennan at a nearby table. She was frantically typing on her laptop, surrounded by legal documents. When she saw me, her face contorted with rage. She started to approach, but the librarian, who'd been briefed about the restraining order, immediately called security. therapy. As security escorted her out, Dr. Brennan shouted accusations about me ruining her life. Other library patrons stared in shock as she claimed I was a master manipulator who'd orchestrated her downfall. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the real story. Her outburst at the library proved to be her final undoing. Multiple witnesses provided statements about her erratic behavior and threats. The security footage clearly showed her agitated state and aggressive approach toward a minor. Our lawyer added this incident to our growing case file. Dr. Martinez helped our family process the ongoing stress of Dr. Brennan's harassment. She taught us coping strategies and reminded us that Dr. Brennan's behavior was a reflection of her own issues, not anything we'd done wrong. She also connected us with other families who'd experienced similar situations with unethical therapists. Through these connections, I learned our story wasn't unique. Many families had been damaged by therapists who'd lost sight of their professional obligations. Some had spent years recovering from bad advice, inappropriate interventions, and manipulative tactics designed to keep them in therapy indefinitely. I started corresponding with other teens who'd recognized malpractice in their family's therapy. We shared resources and strategies for documentation. One girl from across the state had successfully exposed a therapist who'd been romantically pursuing her mother while supposedly providing marriage counseling. These connections strengthened my resolve. Dr. Brennan wasn't just a bad therapist. She was part of a larger problem in the mental health field. While most therapists were ethical professionals, the bad ones could cause tremendous damage before being stopped. The state licensing board scheduled a formal hearing for the following month. We were asked to provide testimony about our experiences. I spent weeks preparing my presentation, organizing evidence chronologically, and creating visual aids to illustrate the pattern of Dr. Brennan's misconduct. Dr. Brennan made one last desperate attempt to salvage her career. She filed a counter-complaint claiming we'd hacked her computer and stolen confidential files. When investigators examined her devices, they found no evidence of hacking, but did discover she'd been keeping illegal recordings of sessions and maintaining files on clients long after treatment ended. Her former colleagues began distancing themselves publicly. The practice where she'd briefly worked issued a statement condemning her actions and supporting the investigation. Several professional organizations revoked her memberships and removed her from their directories. As the hearing date approached, our family grew stronger. My parents' relationship had never been better. They'd learned to communicate openly, support each other through difficult times, and maintain healthy boundaries with their children. The daily check-ins I'd anonymously suggested had become a cherished ritual they continued on their own. My little brother, who'd been confused and scared during the worst of it, now felt secure in our stable home. He'd started opening up about his own feelings and fears, knowing our parents would listen without judgment. Dr. Martinez had helped our entire family develop better communication skills. I received a letter from the State Psychological Association commending my exceptional documentation and ethical reasoning in exposing Dr. Brennan's malpractice. They invited me to speak at a conference about recognizing and reporting therapeutic misconduct. My parents proudly framed the letter, finally seeing my intervention as the act of love it had always been. The investigation revealed that Dr. Brennan had harmed dozens of families over her career. Her toxic advice had contributed to divorces, custody battles, and fractured relationships. Many former clients were now seeking legitimate therapy to undo the damage she'd caused. Our lawyer informed us that several families were considering civil action against Dr. Brennan. While we chose not to pursue financial damages, we supported others who needed compensation for the harm they'd suffered. Our testimony would be crucial in establishing her pattern of malpractice. Dr. Martinez continued working with our family, not because we were broken, but because we valued growth and connection. She helped me understand that my desire to help my parents came from love, even if my methods had been unconventional. She also taught me healthier ways to support others without overstepping boundaries. As I prepared for the licensing board hearing, I reflected on how much had changed. My parents' marriage was stronger than ever. Our family had learned to communicate openly and honestly. I discovered a passion for psychology and ethics that would shape my future career. And most importantly, we'd prevented Dr. Brennan from destroying more families. The night before the hearing, our family had a quiet dinner together. We didn't discuss Dr. Brennan or the upcoming testimony. Instead, we laughed about my brother's school play, planned a weekend camping trip, and enjoyed being a normal, happy family. It was everything I'd hoped for when I first started leaving those psychology books around the house. I realized that Dr. Brennan's vendetta had ultimately backfired in the most spectacular way. Her attempts to destroy our family had only made us stronger. Her efforts to discredit me had revealed my strengths, and her campaign of harassment had exposed her own professional failures to the world. Tomorrow, I would sit before the licensing board and tell our story. I would present my evidence, share our experiences, and trust that justice would prevail. But tonight, I was just a teenager having dinner with my family, grateful for parents who loved each other and a home filled with laughter instead of tears. The morning of the licensing board hearing arrived with an unexpected twist. Dr. Brennan had filed an emergency motion to postpone, claiming she needed more time to prepare her defense. The board denied it immediately. They'd already delayed once at her request, and the accumulating complaints demanded swift action. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a navy blazer Mom had bought for debate club. My hands trembled slightly as I organized my presentation materials one final time. Dad noticed and squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. Mom smoothed down my hair and told me she was proud of me. Even my little brother gave me a thumbs up over his cereal bowl. The state licensing board operated from a nondescript office building downtown. We arrived early and found the waiting room already filling with people. I recognized some faces from the online forums, former clients of Dr. Brennan who'd traveled from neighboring towns to provide testimony. A woman caught my eye and nodded encouragingly. Her teenage daughter sat beside her, clutching a folder similar to mine. Mrs. Chen arrived with Principal Morrison, both having taken personal time to support our case. Dr. Hoffman came too, carrying his professional assessment of my mental health. Dr. Martinez had offered to attend, but we decided her presence might complicate things, given her current role as our family therapist. The hearing room felt more like a conference space than a courtroom. 5 board members sat behind a long table, reviewing thick binders of documentation. The lead investigator, a stern woman woman with silver hair, called the session to order. Dr. Brennan sat at a separate table with her attorney, her usually disheveled appearance replaced by an ill-fitting suit and excessive makeup. The investigator began by outlining the scope of complaints against Dr. Brennan. The list was extensive: boundary violations, inappropriate self-disclosure, billing fraud, breach of confidentiality, practicing outside her competence, and abandonment of clients. She noted that complaints had been filed by 17 different individuals or families over the past 3 years. Dr. Brennan's attorney tried to argue that the complaints were orchestrated, a conspiracy led by a vindictive teenager. Mrs. Chen, showing up to support them at the licensing board hearing, reveals the depth of positive connections this family has built through their honesty. 17 families filing complaints over 3 years suggests Dr. Brennan's harmful patterns ran much deeper than anyone initially realized. The board members exchanged skeptical glances. One asked how a 13-year-old could have influenced clients from different cities who'd never met. The attorney had no coherent answer. The first witnesses were former clients from Dr. Brennan's previous practice. A middle-aged man described how she'd convinced him his wife was having affairs based on no evidence, leading to an unnecessary divorce. A young woman testified that Dr. Brennan had shared details of her sessions at a party, humiliating her in front of mutual acquaintances. Each story painted a picture of systematic professional misconduct. When my turn came, I approached the podium with my presentation materials. The investigator smiled slightly and told me to take my time. I began with a timeline of Dr. Brennan's sessions with my parents, showing how her advice consistently contradicted established therapeutic practices. I presented graphs correlating her interventions with the deterioration of their relationship. I showed them my research comparing her methods to evidence-based approaches. The board members leaned forward, clearly impressed by the thoroughness of my documentation. One asked about my sources, and I provided a full bibliography, including peer-reviewed journals and professional guidelines. The crucial evidence came from Dr. Brennan's own actions after I'd exposed her incompetence. I presented the school's documentation of her escalating calls, the police reports from her house visit, the fake social media accounts traced to her IP address, and witness statements from the library incident. The pattern of harassment was undeniable. Dr. Brennan's attorney tried to cross-examine me, suggesting I'd manipulated evidence. I calmly referred him to the official documents, all obtained through proper channels. When he implied I'd hacked Dr. Brennan's computer, I pointed out that she'd made that accusation without evidence, and the investigation had actually revealed her illegal recording of sessions. My parents testified next, describing how Dr. Brennan's advice had nearly destroyed their marriage, and how her retaliation had traumatized our family. Dad's voice cracked when he described considering sending me away based on her lies. Mom detailed the sleepless nights worrying that something was wrong with me, only to realize Dr. Brennan was the problem. Dr. Hoffman provided expert testimony about my psychological evaluation. He stated unequivocally that I showed no signs of pathology, describing my behavior as that of an intelligent, caring child who'd recognized a threat to her family and responded with remarkable resourcefulness. He criticized Dr. Brennan's attempt to pathologize normal teenage intelligence and family loyalty. Principal Morrison and Mrs. Chen testified about Dr. Brennan's inappropriate contact with the school. They documented every call, email, and complaint, showing an escalating pattern of harassment targeting a minor. Mrs. Chen mentioned that she'd felt ethically obligated to report Dr. Brennan's behavior, regardless of the impact on their professional relationship. The afternoon brought more former clients. Each story revealed new depths of Dr. Brennan's misconduct. She'd told one couple to divorce because their astrological signs were incompatible. She'd suggested another client seduce her best friend's husband to test his loyalty. She'd prescribed meditation techniques she'd learned from a YouTube video, claiming they were cutting-edge therapy. The financial evidence proved particularly damaging. The investigator presented records showing Dr. Brennan had billed insurance companies for sessions that never occurred, charged clients for phone calls about her own problems, and continued billing families after they'd terminated treatment. The fraud totaled over $30,000. Dr. Brennan finally took the stand in her own defense. Her testimony was a disaster. She rambled about being persecuted, claimed her methods were too advanced for conventional understanding, and accused the board of jealousy over her success. When asked about specific ethical violations, she either denied obvious facts or justified them with bizarre psychological theories. The breaking point came when she tried to blame everything on me. She called me a master manipulator who'd orchestrated an elaborate scheme to destroy her career. She claimed I'd planted evidence, coerced witnesses, and hacked into her computer systems. The board members looked incredulous. One pointed out that I was 13 years old during most of these events. Her attorney tried damage control, but Dr. Brennan wouldn't stop talking. She revealed details about other clients, violating confidentiality in real time. She admitted to recording sessions, but insisted it was for research. She even confessed to maintaining files on prominent community members for future reference. Her attorney put his head in his hands. The board called a recess to deliberate. We waited in the hallway with other families, sharing quiet conversations about our experiences. The woman I'd noticed earlier introduced herself and her daughter. They'd driven 3 hours to testify about how Dr. Brennan had convinced the mother her daughter's anxiety was actually early-onset schizophrenia, leading to unnecessary medication and hospitalization. After 2 hours, we were called back. The board's decision was unanimous. Dr. Brennan's license was revoked immediately. She was barred from practicing therapy in the state and would be reported to national databases to prevent her from obtaining licenses elsewhere. The financial fraud would be referred to the Attorney General's office for potential criminal prosecution. Dr. Brennan erupted. She screamed about injustice, threatened to sue everyone present, and had to be escorted out by security. Her attorney quickly distanced himself, stating he'd been unaware of the extent of her misconduct. The investigator thanked all the witnesses for their courage in coming forward. Outside the building, families exchanged contact information, forming an informal support network. Several people thanked me personally, saying my documentation had given them the courage to file their own complaints. I felt overwhelmed by the weight of what we'd accomplished. The drive home was quiet but peaceful. My parents held hands in the front seat while my brother played games on his tablet. The ordeal was finally me over. Dr. Brennan could never hurt another family the way she'd hurt ours. Over the following weeks, the aftermath unfolded predictably. Dr. Brennan's practice closed immediately. Her landlord found the office abandoned, with confidential files scattered everywhere. A court-appointed administrator had to secure the records and notify affected clients. Local news briefly covered the license revocation, but we declined all interview requests. Some of Dr. Brennan's former colleagues reached out to affected families, offering pro bono sessions to undo the damage. The therapist who'd shared office space with her expressed shock at the revelations, saying she'd noticed odd behavior, but never imagined the extent of the misconduct. Our family continued working with Dr. Martinez, processing the trauma of Dr. Brennan's manipulation and harassment. My parents' relationship grew stronger through facing adversity together. They maintained their daily check-ins and added weekly date nights. Their communication improved dramatically, and they learned to address conflicts before they escalated. I returned to being a regular teenager, focusing on school and friends. Sarah and I rebuilt our friendship, and she became fascinated with psychology after learning about our experience. We started a peer support group at school for students dealing with family stress, supervised by Mrs. Chen. The State Psychological Association followed through on their invitation. I spoke at their annual conference about recognizing therapeutic malpractice from a client's perspective. The presentation was well received, and several therapists thanked me for the insights. They implemented new training modules based on our experience. Dr. Brennan made one final attempt at revenge. She filed a civil lawsuit claiming defamation and conspiracy. It was dismissed immediately, with the judge noting that truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Her attorney withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with his client. We learned through the support network that Dr. Brennan had left the state. Someone spotted her working at a retail store 2 towns over, no longer able to practice her profession. While part of me felt sorry for her, I remembered all the families she damaged with her incompetence and manipulation. My brother, who'd been too young to understand most of what happened, simply knew that our family was happier. He stopped asking why mom and dad acted weird because they'd found their rhythm. Family dinners became enjoyable again, filled with laughter and genuine conversation. The experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up for truth, even when authority figures disagree. It showed me the importance of documentation and evidence in confronting wrongdoing. Most importantly, it demonstrated that families can emerge stronger from crisis when they face it together. 6 months after the hearing, we received a letter from the Attorney General's office. Dr. Brennan had pled guilty to insurance fraud and received probation with mandatory restitution. She was required to pay back the money she'd stolen and perform community service. It felt like appropriate justice, not excessive, but enough to hold her accountable. Our story became a cautionary tale in local therapy circles. Several practices implemented new oversight procedures to prevent similar situations. The licensing board created stricter guidelines for reporting suspected malpractice and protecting whistleblowers. Small changes, but meaningful ones. I continued my interest in psychology, but with a focus on ethics and consumer protection. My high school guidance counselor helped me find internship opportunities with patient advocacy organizations. I learned that our experience, while extreme, wasn't unique. Many people struggled with incompetent or unethical mental health providers. The families from the hearing stayed in touch through a private online group. We shared resources, celebrated victories, and supported each other through setbacks. Some were still dealing with the damage Dr. Brennan had caused, but all were on paths to healing. My parents occasionally reflected on how close they'd come to divorce. They credited my intervention with saving their marriage, though I reminded them they'd done the hard work of rebuilding. I just removed a toxic influence and pointed them toward healthier resources. As I prepared for college applications, I wrote about the experience in my essays, not as a victim story, but as an example of critical thinking and advocacy. Several admissions counselors commented on the maturity and thoughtfulness of my approach to a difficult situation. Dr. Martinez gradually reduced our session frequency as our family stabilized. She praised our resilience and growth, noting that we'd transformed a traumatic experience into an opportunity for deeper connection. Our final session was more celebration than therapy. The day I received my first college acceptance letter, Mom and Dad were more excited than I was. They'd supported my dreams throughout the ordeal, never letting Dr. Brennan's lies affect their faith in me. We celebrated with dinner at my favorite restaurant, just the 4 of us, a normal family enjoying a special moment. Looking at them across the table, I felt profound gratitude, not just for surviving Dr. Brennan's assault on our family, but for emerging with stronger bonds and deeper understanding. We'd learned to communicate, to trust, and to protect each other. Those lessons were worth more than any therapy could have provided. That final dinner scene at the favorite restaurant just fills me with happiness. A simple, normal family moment that means everything after what they went through.